What if the food sitting right now in your freezer, the food you trust, the food you eat every single day because it is easy, because it is convenient, because it feels harmless, what if that very food is quietly, silently, invisibly building a catastrophic stroke inside your brain at this exact moment and you have absolutely no idea it is happening? What if I told you that millions of seniors over the age of 60 are consuming 4 specific frozen foods that medical research has directly linked to dangerous blood clots, skyrocketing blood pressure, and devastating strokes that steal lives, steal memories, and steal independence within seconds? What if the solution is not a complicated medication, not an expensive surgery, not a difficult lifestyle overhaul, but simply knowing which 4 frozen foods to remove from your freezer starting today? Your brain is worth protecting. Your life is worth fighting for. And the next few minutes of this video could be the most important minutes you spend this entire year. Stay with me, because what you are about to learn will shock you. It will change how you shop forever, and it might just save your life or the life of someone you deeply love. What if the most dangerous thing threatening your life right now is not a disease you can feel, not a pain you can identify, not a symptom your doctor warned you about, but something completely invisible, something sitting silently inside your freezer, something you purchased with your own hands, something you are feeding yourself and your family with genuine love and zero awareness of the destruction it is causing inside your body? What if I told you that right now, today, millions of people over the age of 60 are unknowingly eating their way toward a stroke, and the weapon being used against them is not alcohol, not cigarettes, not obvious junk food sitting on a shelf, but frozen food, packaged beautifully, labeled conveniently, marketed brilliantly, and designed to slowly devastate the cardiovascular system of every senior who consumes it regularly without knowing the terrifying truth hidden behind those colorful packages? This is not a scare tactic. This is not exaggeration. This is biology. This is science. This is documented medical research. And this is the conversation that nobody is having loudly enough, urgently enough, or honestly enough with the people who need to hear it most desperately. When you cross the age of 60, your body undergoes profound and irreversible changes. Your blood vessels lose their natural elasticity and flexibility. Your arterial walls become thicker, stiffer, and significantly more vulnerable to damage. Your kidneys, which are responsible for filtering toxins and regulating blood pressure, begin operating at reduced capacity. Your liver processes chemicals and artificial compounds far more slowly than it did during your younger years. Your metabolism slows dramatically. Your inflammatory response becomes chronically elevated. And your heart, that magnificent organ that is beaten for you every single second of your entire life, becomes increasingly sensitive to every single thing you eat, drink, breathe, and consume. This biological reality means that what a 30-year-old body can manage, process, and recover from with relative ease becomes genuinely dangerous, potentially catastrophic, and sometimes permanently devastating for a body that has been working hard for 6 decades or more. And frozen food manufacturers know none of this matters to their profit margins. Let us talk about the first frozen food that you must remove from your life immediately if you are over 60, and that is frozen pizza. Frozen pizza is perhaps the most deceptively dangerous food product ever created for the senior population. On the surface, it appears harmless. It is convenient. It is affordable. It is familiar. It reminds many people of family gatherings, of simple pleasures, of easy weeknight dinners. But beneath that comforting surface lies a combination of ingredients that is nothing short of catastrophic for the aging cardiovascular system. A single serving of most commercially available frozen pizzas contains between 700 and 1,200 milligrams of sodium. But here is what makes this genuinely terrifying. Nobody eats a single serving of frozen pizza. Nobody opens a pizza box and eats 2 slices and feels satisfied. The reality is that most people consume an entire frozen pizza or the majority of one in a single sitting, which means they are consuming anywhere from 2,000 to 3,500 milligrams of sodium in one meal alone. The American Heart Association recommends that adults, particularly those with elevated blood pressure or cardiovascular concerns, consume no more than 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day. Seniors over 60 with any history of hypertension, heart disease, or kidney issues are advised to stay even lower than that. What happens inside your body when you consume that level of sodium in one sitting? Your blood vessels, already stiff and less elastic due to age-related changes, are forced to manage a sudden and dramatic increase in fluid volume as your body desperately tries to dilute that sodium concentration. Your blood pressure spikes. Your heart is forced to work significantly harder than it should. And if your arterial walls already have any plaque buildup, any existing narrowing, any inflammation, that sudden pressure surge creates exactly the kind of dangerous conditions under which blood clots form, travel to the brain, and cause strokes. But sodium is only half of the frozen pizza problem. The cheese on frozen pizza is loaded with saturated fat. The processed meat toppings, the pepperoni, the sausage, the bacon contain both saturated fat and trans fat compounds that directly contribute to the formation of arterial plaque. The refined white flour crust causes rapid blood sugar spikes that damage the delicate inner lining of blood vessels over time. And the preservatives, the chemical stabilizers, the artificial flavor enhancers, all of these compounds trigger systemic inflammation throughout the body, and chronic vascular inflammation is one of the most powerful and well-documented risk factors for stroke that medical science has ever identified. Every single time a senior over 60 sits down and eats a frozen pizza, they are not just enjoying a convenient meal. They are loading their cardiovascular system with sodium, saturated fat, refined carbohydrates, chemical preservatives, and pro-inflammatory compounds simultaneously. And they are doing it in a body that no longer has the biological resilience to manage that assault without consequences. The second frozen food that seniors must eliminate without hesitation is frozen breakfast sandwiches and processed frozen breakfast meats. Walk into any grocery store in any city and you will find an entire section dedicated to frozen breakfast convenience items. Frozen sausage patties, frozen bacon strips, frozen breakfast burritos, frozen egg and cheese sandwiches on English muffins, frozen croissant sandwiches stuffed with processed ham, artificial egg products, and processed cheese slices. These products are marketed specifically to older adults because they are positioned as easy, quick, no-hassle morning solutions. And for seniors who live alone, who have mobility limitations, who have reduced energy for cooking, this marketing is extraordinarily effective and extraordinarily dangerous. The sodium content in a single frozen breakfast sandwich routinely exceeds 800 to 1,100 milligrams. The processed meat components, whether sausage, bacon, or ham, are preserved using sodium nitrate and sodium nitrite, chemical compounds that research has linked to increased arterial inflammation, DNA damage in blood vessel cells, and elevated risk of cardiovascular disease. But here is the detail that makes frozen breakfast items particularly devastating for senior health specifically. Most seniors consume these products first thing in the morning on an empty stomach after 8 or more hours of sleep during which their bodies were in a natural fasting, repairing, and recovery state. Blood pressure in healthy adults is naturally lower in the morning hours. The cardiovascular system is in a more vulnerable, less defended state in the early morning. When you wake up and immediately introduce 1,000 milligrams of sodium, significant saturated fat from processed meat, refined carbohydrates from processed bread products, and chemical preservatives from artificial ingredients into that vulnerable morning cardiovascular environment, the effect on blood pressure and arterial stress is not gradual. It is immediate. It is dramatic. And for a senior whose blood vessels are already compromised by age, by existing plaque, by years of dietary choices, that morning blood pressure spike can be the event that triggers a stroke. Medical research has identified early morning hours, specifically between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., as the highest risk window for stroke occurrence in seniors. This is not coincidence. This is biology responding to the sudden physiological demands placed on the cardiovascular system during the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Adding a frozen breakfast sandwich loaded with sodium and saturated fat to that already vulnerable morning window is like lighting a match in a room that already contains smoke. The third frozen food that represents serious and documented danger for seniors over 60 is frozen pot pies and frozen casserole meals. Frozen pot pies occupy a particularly deceptive space in the grocery store because they carry powerful emotional and nostalgic associations. Chicken pot pie, beef stew pot pie, turkey pot pie. These products remind people of home-cooked comfort food, of grandmother's cooking, of warm family meals, of wholesome traditional eating. The branding reinforces this deception with images of golden pastry crusts, steaming vegetables, and hearty fillings that suggest nourishment and care. The reality inside that frozen pot pie is profoundly different from the image on the box. A single commercially produced frozen pot pie, and remember, these are typically marketed as single-serving items, contains between 1,300 and 1,800 milligrams of sodium. That is almost the entire daily sodium allowance recommended for seniors in one product. Beyond sodium, the pastry crust of a frozen pot pie is made with partially hydrogenated vegetable shortening, which contains trans fats that are among the most cardiovascularly destructive substances a human being can consume. Trans fats do something particularly frightening inside the body. They simultaneously raise levels of LDL cholesterol, the dangerous form that builds arterial plaque, while actively lowering levels of HDL cholesterol, the protective form that helps keep arteries clean. This double negative effect on cholesterol balance is uniquely destructive. And in seniors whose arteries already carry decades of accumulated plaque deposits, this trans fat effect dramatically accelerates the narrowing of blood vessels that eventually cuts off blood supply to the brain. The filling inside most frozen pot pies contains not fresh vegetables, but processed vegetable pieces preserved in thick, heavily salted, artificially thickened gravies that contribute additional sodium loads on top of the already dangerous levels in the pastry itself. The protein components, whether chicken, beef, or turkey, in frozen pot pies are typically the lowest quality cuts of processed meat, treated with salt solutions and chemical tenderizers to improve texture and extend shelf life. When a senior over 60 sits down to eat a frozen pot pie because it feels like a warm, comforting, nourishing meal, they are actually consuming a product specifically engineered to maximize palatability through salt, fat, and chemical flavor enhancement, with absolutely zero consideration given to the cardiovascular consequences for an aging body. And the fourth frozen food that seniors must understand is a genuine stroke risk is frozen ice cream novelties, frozen dessert bars, and processed frozen sweet treats. Now, many people will hear this and immediately think that the danger here is obvious, that sugar-laden desserts are clearly unhealthy, and that this point is less surprising than the others. But the specific mechanism by which frozen desserts create stroke risk in seniors goes far beyond simple sugar content, and understanding this mechanism is genuinely important. Commercial frozen ice cream bars, frozen novelty treats, frozen cheesecake slices, and processed frozen desserts are not made from simple cream, eggs, and sugar the way traditional homemade ice cream once was. Modern commercial frozen desserts are complex chemical formulations containing high fructose corn syrup, artificial sweeteners, carrageenan, polysorbate 80, mono and diglycerides, artificial colors, artificial flavors, and numerous other chemical stabilizers and emulsifiers designed to maintain texture through the freeze-thaw cycles of commercial production and distribution. High fructose corn syrup, which is the primary sweetener in most commercial frozen desserts, metabolizes differently from regular sugar in the human body. It is processed almost entirely by the liver, and when consumed in the quantities present in frozen dessert products, it triggers a specific metabolic cascade that elevates triglyceride levels in the blood, promotes the accumulation of visceral fat, increases uric acid production, which damages blood vessel linings, and drives chronic systemic inflammation throughout the cardiovascular system. In seniors over 60, whose baseline inflammatory markers are already elevated due to the natural aging process, whose triglyceride levels are often already borderline elevated, and whose liver function is already somewhat reduced, the regular consumption of high fructose corn syrup from frozen desserts creates a sustained, compounding inflammatory assault on the vascular system that materially and measurably increases stroke risk over time. But there is another dimension to frozen dessert danger for seniors that receives almost no attention, and that is the combination effect. Seniors who consume frozen pizza for dinner and then follow it with a frozen ice cream bar or a frozen dessert are stacking cardiovascular insults on top of each other in ways that amplify the danger of each individual item exponentially. The sodium from the pizza raises blood pressure. The saturated fat from the pizza begins triggering inflammatory responses. And then the high fructose corn syrup and chemical compounds from the dessert add additional inflammatory load, additional triglyceride elevation, and additional vascular stress on top of an already compromised system. This combination effect is not theoretical. It is measurable in blood work. It shows up as elevated inflammatory markers, as increased blood viscosity, as higher blood pressure readings, and has increased platelet aggregation, meaning the blood becomes more prone to clotting in ways that can be directly and fatally triggered by existing narrowed arteries in a senior's brain. The relationship between frozen food consumption and stroke risk in seniors is not a matter of individual ingredients acting in isolation. It is a matter of how these products collectively, cumulatively, and repeatedly assault a cardiovascular system that is already operating under the natural biological stresses of aging, and eventually that system reaches a breaking point. Understanding this is not about living in fear. It is not about abandoning every convenience that modern life offers. It is about making informed choices with accurate information about what these specific products are actually doing inside your specific aging body with your specific cardiovascular vulnerabilities and your specific biological needs. Your freezer should contain foods that support your health, that protect your arteries, that reduce inflammation, that maintain healthy blood pressure, and that give your heart and brain the best possible environment to keep functioning with strength and clarity for years to come. Fresh frozen vegetables without added sodium or sauces are fine. Frozen fruits are wonderful. Properly stored homemade meals that you prepare with whole ingredients and freeze yourself are excellent solutions for convenience without danger. But the four categories we have discussed today, frozen pizza, frozen processed breakfast items, frozen pot pies and casserole meals, and commercial frozen desserts, these are products that the science clearly identifies as disproportionately dangerous for the aging cardiovascular system and genuinely worth removing from a senior's regular diet. Your brain is irreplaceable. The neurons that fire with your memories, your personality, your ability to love and communicate and experience your life, those neurons depend on a continuous, unobstructed supply of oxygenated blood. Every step you take to protect your blood vessels, every processed frozen food you choose to eliminate, every inflammatory ingredient you decide to avoid, is a direct investment in the continued health and function of the most complex and precious organ in your body. You have lived long enough to deserve better than a freezer full of products designed to maximize corporate profit at the expense of your cardiovascular health. You have earned the right to know exactly what is being sold to you, exactly what it is doing inside your body, and exactly what choices you can make to protect the extraordinary, irreplaceable, beautifully complex life that continues to unfold inside you every single day. Take care of the body that has carried you through every experience, every challenge, every joy, and every decade of your remarkable life. It deserves your attention, your protection, and your best choices.